Hi, Motasem. Welcome to Reinvent. We're happy to have you.
Thanks for having me on this meeting. Thank you very much. I hope we will have a good time explaining the topic on this meeting. I hope everyone will be happy with the outcome we will have on this meeting.
Great. Okay, so once again, welcome, Motasem. I'm going to go ahead and tell the audience about a little bit about you and the topic that you're going to be speaking on. You can go ahead and set up your screen share in the meantime. So, Motasem is a cybersecurity trainer and consultant. He's going to be talking about the essentials of penetration testing tools and training for network security assessments. A little bit about Motasem. Motasem studied a Master's of Cybersecurity at Charles Sturt University, and he is specializing in healthcare domain of cybersecurity. He is working with firms in healthcare as a security consultant and pentester. So with that, once again, welcome, Motasem. Stage is yours. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.
All right, then. So it's enough that Mr. Alita what said about me. My topic of this presentation will be about essentials of penetration testing tools and training for network security assessments. So the basic audience for this presentation are pen testers, security engineers, security consultants, trainers, and anyone who is also a beginner in this domain. They can also have some important details about the difference between network security assessments and penetration testing and the essentials you might need in your journey in dealing with pen testing tools. So basically, we're going to start with defining what is a network security assessment. So basically, when we say network security assessment, we have to think of 4 aspects: the definition, the objectives, the actors, the outcome. Now, as far as the definition is concerned, we want to see what is a network security assessment, right? So actually, when I conduct a network security assessment, what I'm doing actually is finding out how are the security measures of the current network doing, right? Are the security measures implemented in a good way, in a bad way? Are there security misconfigurations I need my client to be aware of? So I'm trying to form a full picture about the status of my client's network. What are the current security measures in there? Now, the objective of network security assessment, as you can see, it is finding weaknesses, right? I want to find out the weakness before the bad guys do, right? I want to find what are the vulnerabilities, how can I patch them? I want to see the full picture, right? I don't want I want the bad guys to reach the sensitive details before me, right? So when I conduct network security assessment, I put this objective, right? I want to find what are the weaknesses. Now, who are the actors? So basically, who conducts network security assessment is a team of pen testers and security engineers. Now, you may ask me, what's the difference now? Well, you're saying pen testers, right? So pen testing is it's within the network security assessment, right? But sometimes security engineers and pen testers, they would form an ally in conducting the network security assessment. It depends on the scenario. There is no unified form of who are the actors, right? So the outcome of the network security assessment. When I finish the network security assessment, my goal is to form a report that lists the sensitive details I have, right? I want to see what are the assets I want to protect, and I want to see what are the weaknesses and attack exposures that, if taken advantage of, would be disastrous effect for my organization. So I want to list what are the inventory I have and the weaknesses or vulnerabilities attached to them. So that is about the picture or brief picture about network security assessment. So basically now, what are the types of network security assessment? So the first thing, we have vulnerability assessment, and the second thing is penetration testing. So they are totally different, but they have some crossroads, right? There are some common factors between vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. The main difference is, in vulnerability assessment, guys, I would like to know, right? I want to assess actually, in simple words, I want to see what are the vulnerabilities, right, that can be exploited to gain access to my network, but I don't exploit them. That's the difference. So in vulnerability assessment, I scan the network, right, and I see a list of the vulnerabilities. I prioritize them according to the impact and the likelihood of occurrence. While in pen testing, I know the vulnerabilities, right? I find out about the vulnerabilities, but I also exploit them. I found a proof of concept to my client, and I say, yes, your system can be compromised. So that's the difference between pen testing and vulnerability assessment. The difference is in the outcome. The outcome of vulnerability assessment is a list of the vulnerabilities, right? According to the impact and the likelihood. Pen testing, the outcome will be the root compromise of the target. Of course, sometimes the outcome of pen testing depends on the client and the jurisdiction. Sometimes you're not allowed to root the system. You're allowed only to tell your client that, yes, your system is can be compromised, and here's the exploit, the proof of concept, but you're not allowed to root the system. That depends on the scenario. Okay, now we want to talk about the methodology of conducting a network security assessment. So let's say I'm an organization, right, and I want to hire a team from outside my company. Let's say they are agency, right, cybersecurity agency. They will conduct the network security assessment. What are you going to do? How are you going to start? So the first thing is building the inventory. The inventory is a list of your assets, right? The assets could be technological assets, digital assets, or could be physical assets. So depending on the scenario, right? And I want to know what kind of network security assessment will be. Is it going to be vulnerability assessment? Is it going to be pen testing? It's going to be only for the digital assets I have. Is it going to be for the physical testing for the physical security measures? So based on that, I want to put my inventory, right? I have, for example, the server room. I have the data center. I have the hardwares. I have the endpoints. So this is the inventory, right? So the second thing, I identify the scope of my assessment. So what's the frame I'm going to move in? Am I going to test only the outside network, like the Dmz network? Am I going to test the whole network? The whole network means that the Dmz network, the Dmz is the network that's exposed to the internet. Like, for example, my client has a web server. Web server is hosted locally on their system. When I say the Dmz, right, the Dmz is the network that's exposed to the internet. In this case, it is the web server. Now, the internal network is the collection of internal endpoints in different departments: the finance, the accounting, the HR. All of them, they work on endpoints, right? They're computers. These computers lie within the internal network. So when I say I want to identify the scope of my assessment, am I going to test the entire network, or am I going to test only the exposed network, the Dmz, or the internal network? I want to define what is in my scope. The third aspect is conducting a thorough scan of network, including assets in scope. So here I start my work. Let's say I am interested, or my client is interested only in testing the Dmz network. So in my scope, I am allowed only to test the web servers, right? The servers that are exposed to the internet. So I conduct a thorough scan using specialized programs agreed upon with the client and allowed locally in the jurisdiction which I am in to start my scanning of the identified and the targets in the scope. Now, the result of the scan, of course, here we are talking about vulnerability assessment, right? Part of network security assessment is vulnerability assessment. So here I am scanning the network, right? I found the vulnerabilities. Let's say the web server is out of date and hasn't been patched in a while. So this could be an attack vector. And if there is an available exploit out there, right, written by other developers, so bad guys can take that exploit and compromise my web server and maybe the entire network. So I put here in the report that your server or your web server could be Apache or could be IIS, right? So this server is out of date and has this exploit, and the impact of exploiting that vulnerability, right, or the security misconfiguration is high. Why? Because it would lead to a full system compromise. Now, these are the findings that I would look for in a network security assessment report or vulnerability assessment report. Now, the fourth step is it's kind of optional, right? Connecting the findings with the risk assessment results. So basically, risk assessment it's broader than the network security assessment. Risk assessment is about everything in the company, right? The physical assets, the digital assets, everything you have. So you conduct a risk assessment on your assets and you put what are the weaknesses, what are the impacts, you put the disaster recovery plan in there. So basically, when I connect the network security assessment with the risk assessment, I want to see, right, what are the plans of my clients, right? What are their plans to patch and minimize the risk of the current vulnerabilities? I want to see their policies, right? What are their priorities? So that's why I connected with the risk assessment results. Lastly, prioritize the patching process according to the impacts. Now, the patching process could be undertaken by the same agency or the same team who are conducting the Nmap security assessment, or it could be your internal team. If you have system administrators, right, who work on your IT assets, they could be the key persons who will patch the vulnerabilities, right? If they are qualified, of course. If they're not qualified, then we're going to need the assistance of the security engineers to implement the patching process. Now, the patching process or patching the vulnerabilities, meaning that I want to eliminate the vulnerabilities, right? I don't want them to be exploited as much as I can. So I patch them. Now, patching is totally different process. It is under the umbrella of patch management. There's a process called patch management where I schedule the patches for my softwares, for my IT assets, in order to minimize the attack exposure. So I prioritize, I see what are the vulnerabilities I have in my reports. Let's say, for example, I have 3 vulnerabilities. One of them, high impact, saying that the web server is out of date and has an available exploit in the wild. The second one is kind of, let's say it's an SMB misconfiguration, right? And the third one, it is information disclosure. Okay, these 3 vulnerabilities, right? I categorize them, prioritize them according to the impact. In my case, the web server being out of date has the highest impact. That's why I'm going to put the most priority on it to patch it. As you can see, your organization may want to test how that could be identified vulnerabilities be exploited with a penetration test. Now, the same organization, right, who are requesting you to conduct a Nmap security assessment for them, they may be requesting you to conduct a penetration test as well. So what I have been talking so far is vulnerability assessment, right? Your organization may request you to conduct a pen test to make sure and to prove that these vulnerabilities that you listed in the reports are actually exploitable, right? So you provide the proof of concept that yes, actually the vulnerabilities in here that I listed for you can be exploited, and here's the proof of concept. So I put a penetration testing in place. All right. Now here the key differences between penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. As I said earlier, the vulnerability assessment aims at finding the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities in the network. Stops here. But pen testing, right, we actively engage with the system, okay? Engage with the system, find out about the vulnerabilities and exploit them in order to compromise the host. And as I said earlier before, guys, the level of compromising the host and having full access to the system, right, could be argued upon with your clients. Some clients, they don't want you to have full access to the system. Maybe they have sensitive details, and it's in their policy to allow you to have full access. But you provide the proof of concept, and this proof of concept has the probability of 100%, right, to compromise the target. Now, the actors, basically, vulnerability assessment is conducted most of the time by a vulnerability assessor or a security engineer. And this is totally different from a pen tester. Pen tester works on the offensive side. Most of the time, security engineer works on the defensive side of the cybersecurity. That's the key difference. And lastly, the vulnerability assessment, as I said earlier, it doesn't exploit the findings. It only lists them according to the impact and to the likelihood. But pen testing, right, the findings are combinations of the unleashed vulnerabilities plus the proof of concept. I want to prove that these vulnerabilities are exploited. All right. So next, the network security assessment tools. Now let's talk about practical aspects of this domain. So what are the tools that these guys use to assess your network? So one of the tools, the first one is Nessus. So Nessus is a unified tool for network vulnerability scanning. You can use this tool. It has community edition, right? Free. You can use it for your own network, or it has paid edition if you are an enterprise. These two, guys, you can use that tool to conduct a full network security assessment of all of the digital assets you have on your network. Of course, here we are talking about only the network, the exposed network, the DMZ, and the internal networks. This includes the servers, the data centers, the internal host, the computers, everything, right? The endpoints. So when I conduct with Nessus that, it finds me the full list of the vulnerabilities I need, and also it creates a report. It is a very effective tool and very widely used in vulnerability scanning and security assessment. And the next one is a bit different, Wireshark. So basically, Wireshark, it is more of a network analyzer. So what I mean by network analyzer is, let's say, for example, you have in your company, you have finance department, HR, and marketing. And on the end, on the side, you have another separated network called the Dmz Network. In this network, you host web server, finance server, so your clients can access the finance server from outside, right? And the web server can be accessed by your clients. So basically, a packet, how can I use Wireshark in this case? When there is a breach scenario, when I suspect that there is malware in my network, what do? What I would do, I would record, right, the activity of what's happening on the network, and I would export every activity in a file. I would take this file. This file has the extension of pcap file, contains all of the activity that's happening in my network, everything. I take this file and I open it in Wireshark. In Wireshark, I analyze every single packet that went off and on my network, in and out of my network, right? I see everything. I can analyze this offline. Most of the time, people would use Wireshark to investigate network activity, right? In case of a breach scenario or in case of network investigation. They want to find out where did the breach came from, how it happens, who are the actors, what are the IP address the attack came from. So we would use Wireshark for this kind of purposes. Now, Nmap. So I guess many of you have heard about Nmap. So Nmap is the widely known network discovery tool and scanning. So basically, we're going to demonstrate all of these tools in the demo after we finish the listing. So basically, Nmap is a tool of multitude of purposes, right? You can use that to scan the network. You can use that to see what are the live hosts on your network. You can use it for vulnerability assessment and a penetration test. Now, you may ask me, how can I use Nmap for pen testing, right? For vulnerability assessment. So basically, Nmap has a scripting engine. In the scripting engine, it contains a list of all the protocols that you can test, right? So you can use a scripting engine to, of course, the results of Nmap regarding the vulnerability assessment, they can't be depend upon solely, right? You need to corroborate and enhance the output with another tool, of course. But the scripting engine of Nmap actually can be used to scan for vulnerabilities. Now, example use case, identifying open ports and the services running on them during a pen test. We're going to see that in a while. Now, the lastly is the Metasploit. Metasploit is more of an exploitation tool, right? But why I'm mentioning Metasploit here, because you use Metasploit if you are conducting a pen test. So basically, Metasploit can be used to automate your pen testing, to automate your exploitation, right? So you save yourself the time of looking for the exploit and writing the exploit. Instead of that, Metasploit contains modules for the exploits, for scanning for vulnerabilities. You can use them ready. Just you have to configure the options and you let it run. Okay. Now, other tools we have: Directory Buster or GoBuster or Nikto. So basically, these two are mostly used while testing web applications. So directory search can be used if you want to find hidden directories on a website. Let's say you are testing www.test.com/directory/homepage/marketing. Everything that comes after the slash called the directory. So directory search, right, used to find hidden directories on the web server. These hidden directories, when you find them, you can access sensitive areas. You use that while you're doing pen testing. Now, Nikto is a web application assessment tool. If you are conducting a pen test for a web application like a website, right, you may use Nikto to find details about the security misconfigurations, the possible vulnerabilities that can be exploited, and such also relevant is about this. Now, lastly, most importantly, guys, the guidelines for using penetration testing tools. Pen testing tools are not to be used like whenever we would like, right? Pen testing tools have some guidelines you have to stick to. The first one, we have to make sure that the tools we are using for the purpose of pen testing or vulnerability assessments are conducted and used against systems we own. Okay, so we want to make sure that the system we're either authorized to use that system, like in the case if you have a contract between you and the client has authorized you to test their systems. So in this case, you can use the pen testing tools, or you are using that for your system to test your own system. Okay. Other than that, it may have legal repercussions if you use pen testing tools against anything you find on the internet. Okay. And I said earlier, don't use against networks and websites you don't own. Legal implications apply according to the jurisdiction, meaning according to the state, according to the country you are in. Every country has its own regulations about this. Now, the third guideline about using the pen testing tools, using the man page. What I mean in the man page is the help tool. Every pen test tool has help menu, right? In this help menu, you can see the function of every switch, the function of every feature of this tool. So, yes, I can hear you. I don't know. Do you hear me? Just give me a...
Yes, Motasem, I can hear you. You can go ahead.
Okay. All right. Basically, when we say use the man pages, we want you to get you familiar with the use of every tool. You can't just run the tool right and just run to this thing. Come on, no. Just make sure you look at the man pages, right? There are many pen testing tools. You can't remember the options and the syntax for every tool, right? You want to always remind yourself of the options available of every tool, right? Okay. Fourth, if you are conducting a pen test for your client, ask whether the tools you will use are approved by your client or not. As I said earlier, guys, basically every client is different. And I had some clients in the healthcare industry, they wouldn't allow it to use Nmap. You see, they have some tools, right? They're approved. And they told me, use this tool, right? Don't use Nmap, don't use Metasploit, don't use this tool, right? Stick to these tools. We have a list of the tools we can use. So make sure you are clear with your client about this. Don't use just the tools. Even if your client didn't explicitly, right, mention that in the contract, just remind them, I want to get clear about what are the approved tools, or if you have any list of approved tools you want me to use. Other than that, you get a written approval from your client to use your own tools. All right. The last one, always use the tools against a virtual machine that replicates the production system you are planning to test. So basically now my client has authorized me to test X system or X computer or X server, right? So I run my testing, right? And I found that there's a vulnerability. So my client asked me to provide a proof of concept that this vulnerability is exploitable. So instead of going ahead and exploiting the vulnerability on the client system, don't do that. Before that, replicate, take a backup of your client's computer, okay? Take it and implement it in a virtual machine, exploit it offline, make sure that everything working perfectly, and then do it live on the production system. Why I'm saying this? Because sometimes, from my experience, we'll find a vulnerability, right, in the client's system, right? And sometimes, if you exploit it on the production system, it would create errors and it would interrupt the business operation of this computer. So make sure you replicate the computer or the system to a virtual machine and test it on your own first. Make sure everything has went smoothly, and then do the exploit on the production system. Okay, now all I have to do is show you the demo now. All right, I'm switching out my virtual machine. All right, so here, as you can see, on the left, I have the output of the Nmap tool we have talked about. On the right, sorry, I have the Metasploit tool. So basically, just a heads up, I'm using the testing against virtual machine by Hack the Box. Hack the Box is a platform. They allow you to practice on their virtual machines. So this is the machine here. I'm authorized to use that. Okay, so as you can see here, I conducted, let me scroll this down. Oh, sorry. Okay, as you can see here, I have the first Nmap scan, right? I'm scanning the network. I want to see, hey, I'm conducting kind of pen testing, right? Suppose this is your client, I will conduct a pen testing. The first thing you would do is to scan the clients, see if they are live, what's running on the system, what's in there, try to form a picture of giving like an audit, right? So I will use Nmap to scan the target. As you can see here, of course, we're not in the position of teaching the switches here, but I will explain the output. So basically, as you can see, this is the result of a typical Nmap scan. You would see the running services. So my client here, or the machine they were testing, right, is running FTP server. FTP is a server for transferring files, right? SSH, it's secure transfer of the files. And as you can see, we have Samba server. So here I formed a picture, right? Full clear picture about what is running on the target. They're running FTP, they're running SSH, and they're running Samba server. This is the first step in your pen testing. It is called the reconnaissance and information gathering. So here I know what's running there. I know what to test. So after that, on the left, on the right here, I'm sorry, this is Metasploit. So basically, I knew beforehand that the server here, or the service called SMB, I know beforehand that this is vulnerable, right? So in the pen testing scenario, you would try to exploit this, as I did on the right side. So I launched Metasploit, MSF cancel, and here I looked for the exploit that I can use against this service. Okay, so I search, type exploit. I'm looking for an exploit here, and the name is Samba. All right. As you can see, Metasploit is a tool that lists you all of the exploits that you can use with the Samba server. Now, I used this one. As you can see, I'm going to highlight this exploit multi-Samba user map script. Now, why would I use this one? As you can see, I have many related to Samba. As I said earlier, you have to test, conduct your testing, and make sure that you don't use the exploits randomly. Don't use them randomly, right? As you can see, I have many exploits. I need to make sure I use the correct one that matches the vulnerable service here. So this service is vulnerable, right? But can be exploited only by this exploit. Of course, if you haven't heard about the exploit, you can just type info and the exploit name. And as you can see, Metasploit gives us full details about the exploit, how it works, what's required from us to provide in order to get this exploit to work. As you can see here, I set show options. In the show options, I provide the needed requirements. For example, rhost stands for the IP of my targets, and here the rport, and lhost and lport are parameters for my own machine. I said this, right? I said exploit. Now, at this stage, I'm conducting the exploitation of the pen testing. Now I am done with the information gathering and reconnaissance. I knew that there is a vulnerable service running. Here I am exploiting this service. As you can see, after running the exploit, I got command shell session 1 open, which means my exploitation has been successful, and now I have access to my target system. And as you can see, if I type ID here, saying I am the root user. Root user is the highest privileged user on Linux system. Of course, when we have access to any system like that, we can wander free in the system. Like, for example, you can see where we are. We are in the root directory, right? We can list what are the files in here. So we have, for example, we can go to root, right? And see what are the sensitive files in here. We can see we can desktop, reset, root.txt. Most of the time, in the case of Hack the Box, you are interested in finding the root flag. But in the case of pen testing, you would want to navigate through the file system like that. So cd, desktop, ls. I want to list the file and desktop, nothing in here. Okay, I can go to home directory now. ls-la. As you can see, I can see here the users on the system. So I have FTP makers service user. I can also explore what in the user directory here. Now, up until now, in the pen testing scenario, we have achieved the purpose of the pen test. We have compromised the target, gained access, and your client now will see that the system is actually vulnerable. Then what we would do, you would provide a report of everything you have done, what are the tools you have used, and the steps you have taken to reach the compromise. All right, so that was about this. And lastly, I would like to say thank you for attending my presentation. And if you have any questions, I am all ears.
Okay,
Yes.
we do have a lot of questions for you. First of all, thank you so much for that demo. It made it very easy to follow your entire presentation and what you were talking about. Okay, so we do have a lot of questions. So I'm going to start off with the first one. For a small-sized organization, can network specialist engineers do the network security assessment, or do they need to have pen testers for the task?
In terms of, it depends on the organization's policy for this. Sometimes the system administrators, if they have the skills to conduct the pen testing, of course, they are encouraged to do that. But some organizations do not prefer this. They want the audits or the testing be conducted from an outside entity to ensure that the results are not biased. So basically, the answer for this, it depends on the organization. Now, if the administrators in there or the network engineers have the required and the qualification to conduct the testing, the rest of the story depends on the organization. If they are okay with the results coming from within the organization, fine. If they're not okay, they want a non-biased option, a non-biased testing, they would go outside.
Okay. So the next question is, what are some of the most common network security vulnerabilities that a pen tester comes across?
For example, in my case, I'm going to talk about my scenarios. I would come across mostly with Sql injection for web applications. That's for applications for also I can talk about command injection. Most of the vulnerabilities you would come across when testing web applications are command injection and Sql injection. Now, basically, Sql injection is a vulnerability that exists in the database systems. So if it exists, you can access the database and dump all of the details of the user and the password hashes. Disastrous.
Okay.
Now, if it is command injection, it is worse. You can, just from interacting with the web application or the website, you can conduct or execute commands that gets executed on the target system, maybe it's Linux or Windows. That's for web applications. Yes, they are the most vulnerable, but these days, most of the time, if the network is very secure, right, and they have an internal team of security engineers, or they have contract with the security operations centers, most of the time the vulnerabilities are not technical. You would find password reuse, right? Okay. So you find a password for some user, and then you can use this password across all of their accounts. So you can compromise the assets. So most of the time, the vulnerabilities here, most widely known vulnerabilities are not necessarily be technical, right? Sometimes it's related to the human, right? The human weakness.
Okay. The next question is, how different are the job roles and expertise of a vulnerability assessor, security engineer, and a penetration tester?
Okay. As I said earlier in the first presentation, in cybersecurity rules, we can divide them into two areas, right? Defensive and the defensive. The security engineer, the security tester, the consultant, the cybersecurity engineer, the security operations center analyst, they work on the defensive side. They're required to monitor, right, everything happening on the network. They want to see a list of all the packets, everything happening on the network, and they would, when they see something suspicious or not good, they would escalate that as an incident, right? So they would declare an incident, something is happening on the network, of course, warrants further investigation. While the pen tester, he is on the offensive side. The offensive side meaning that we are not, pen tester is not meant to protect your system. Of course, the objective is protecting your system, but the pen tester protects your system in a different way. They would attack your system like a hacker does, okay? That's the key difference between a security engineer, vulnerability assessor, and a pen tester in the broad area. But regarding the skills, I would say cybersecurity engineer would need skills mostly in networks, system administration, and log management. While a pen tester needs skills, of course, programming is preferable, because sometimes you would need use scripts to automate your tasks. In the pen testing, you would need more than that. You would need expertise in writing exploits most of the time. You would need expertise in Linux, bash scripting. You would need expertise in programming languages, not necessarily by coding, but by understanding and reading the code, because you might be needed to modify on the code later in the exploitation.
Okay, so we have another interesting question. How do you make sure that you have a complete scan of the complete environment so that no assets are missed while scanning, and therefore the vulnerability scan is complete?
Very good question, actually, because most of the time we see that the client's network is not configured correctly, and the network is not configured correctly, right? So when we add the assets to the vulnerability scanner, let's say my example, I'm using Nessus, right? Nessus would give me an option, add your targets. So I would add the network as a whole by adding the IP and the subnet. So Nessus would scan the entire subnet. That's why I make sure the vulnerability scan is complete. Now, if I'm interested only in one target, like one computer, one endpoint, I would add the IP address and make sure that the findings are correct. So it all comes down to the configuration, right, of the current network and your vulnerability scanner. You have to make sure that the vulnerability scanner is configured correctly to scan everything you're interested in finding out, right? For example, Nessus, you would select the, for example, Nessus has options, right? To scan the web server, to scan for malwares, to scan for ransomware. So you would select the option you are interested in, and you hit scan. That's how we make sure your scans are correct and complete.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. How does traceroute / trace CRT exactly work?
Okay.
I think it's one of the questions.
Okay, this actually traceroute is a tool for tracing the route, right? The path taking from your network to the destination network. For example, when you go to google.com, right? I want to see what's between me and Google, how the packet is traveling, what are the hubs taking between me and the network. Let's say, for example, I am here in Istanbul, right? So in Istanbul, when I hit traceroute google.com, traceroute would give me what are the networks, what are the routes that's my packet is traveling, right, from here all the way to Google. So I would see everything, all of the IPs, all of the routes that are getting me to the right destination. So it's kind of troubleshooting tool more than of intelligence tool, right?
Okay, great. So I think we're done with the questions as well. Apologies for that slight glitch once more, Motasem. I don't know what happened. I think my internet glitched out for a second. Apologies for keeping you waiting. Thank you so much for that very enlightening session, as well as taking us through the entire process of using a couple of tools for penetration testing. That kept it very entertaining. So thank you so much, Motasem, and stay safe. Have a good rest of the day. And we look forward to having you for the rest of our conferences as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
I hope this meeting was helpful and informative, and see you later.
Yes, it was very helpful. Thank you. Bye-bye.